My name is Miralista Pomerci. I'm Associate Dean of the College of Communication Architecture and the Arts. I'm an architect and a professor of architecture here at FIU. I begin with my thanks to Jorge Vani for the kind invitation to the Cuban Research Institute to being staff at the School of International and Public Affairs here at FIU. I should also say that I am the very proud daughter of a Cuban architect, as well as a longtime colleague and a very appreciative colleague, Juan Martinez, whose honor this event is being held. Our second panel will focus on the consolidation of Cuban art during the first half of the 20th century. We have three distinguished panelists, whom I will introduce briefly now. I will follow these wonderful example of the first panel, and we'll be very strict with time. We'll speak for 20 minutes to give an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So the first of our speakers is Dr. Nelly Alvarez. She's an independent scholar and art historian currently working as assistant curator for the Related Group. She previously taught art history at the University of Havana and at the Agrarian University of Havana as well. She's published articles and catalogs on Cuban and Caribbean art and has lectured widely on Cuban and contemporary art in several galleries and other cultural institutions in Miami, in Havana, and in Mexico. Our second speaker will be Ramon Cernuda, a publisher, an editor, a writer, and a Cuban art collector. After 30 years pursuing a lifelong love of Cuban art as a private art collector and researcher, Mr. Cernuda established Cernuda Art Gallery in October of 2000. The gallery specializes in the exhibition and sale of colonial, early Republic, avant-garde, and modern master Cuban paintings, as well as fine artworks by contemporary artists of unquestionable merit as well. Our third speaker is Dr. Carol Damian, a colleague and professor of art and art history in the Department of Art and Art History at Florida International University. She is past chief curator of the Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum at FIU. A specialist in Latin American and Caribbean art, she teaches classes in pre-Columbian, colonial, Spanish, and contemporary Latin American art. She teaches modern art surveys and the course Women in Art. Dr. Damian's most recent work is focused on Latin American women and Cuban exile artists, for whom she has written numerous catalogs and numerous articles. My pleasure then to welcome our first speaker, Annalisa.
Good morning. I wanted to start by thanking the CRI and especially George Wani for inviting me to participate in this panel. And it's for me such an honor to be in this panel with Cernuda and with Carol Damian, who I really look up to. And thank you to Juan for being here also. Juan is very close to my heart, and the three of them are very close to my heart in my path as a professional in the United States. So thank you. It's for me an honor and a challenge to be here with you. I'm going to run the presentation, and it's not, sorry, speaking too close to the mic. It's not going to, I'm not going to go in go slide by slide. It's just to give you a background of the images I will be talking to and the visual universal we'll be talking about. So the presentation is look, you can start it now, and it will give you a spectrum of the artists I will be talking about. Cuban painting at the turn of the century, 1902-1930. The nexus between traditional and avant-garde. In Cuban historiography, the first half of the 20th century has been usually associated with the emergence of modern art. Understanding by this the entrance and assimilation within the Cuban art scene of the avant-garde trends mainly imported from Europe. Whilst not under-evaluating the importance of the 1927 Exposición de Arte Nuevo, or Exhibition of New Art, in the process of updating the repertoire of visual languages, the emergence of the avant-garde generation in the island seems to be part of a more complex process of transition.
The intention of this paper is to assess the art production of the first decades of the 20th century from a synchronous view, from a perspective of plurality, inclusion, and diversity. In contrast with other periods that enjoy considerable criticism, the decades before the beginning of the modern movement, 1930, have been usually overlooked in many of the research on Cuban art. It was early in the first decade of the current century when the National Museum of Fine Arts and the University of Havana showed interest in rethinking the prevailing notions about what has been called the turn of the century. The concept of turn of century in 1893-1930 comes from the new Spanish historiography, currently interested in the revision of the origins of modernity in Spain. By incorporating this terminology in 2001, the Museo Nacional de Bellas Artes introduced a wake-up call about the need to retrace the evolution of Cuban art in the first half of the 20th century. More than the intention to add a new terminology to the already long and complicated list of the historiography vocabulary, the appropriation of this notion put the attention in a period of time that needed to be reassessed beyond the constraints of any aesthetic formula. Motivated by the National Museum of Fine Arts, the Department of Art History at the University of Havana became interested in the study of this time period as well. The essay, Aquel Cambio del Siglo, 2002, by Dr. Luz Merino Acosta, was probably the starting point of what later became my own research. Dr. Merino played an important role in identifying the urgency to reevaluate the entre siglos from a more inclusive perspective. She tried to place the term 10th century in the coordinates of the island, paving the way for further analysis of the period. I was a student of Dr. Merino when I first read this text in 2003, and I took the challenge to go further. I started to question the exclusive perspective prevailing in the literature on Cuban art. Since the foundation of the Academy of San Alejandro in 1818 to the exhibition of New Art 1927, the history of the arts in the country used to be seen as a monolithic block without much nuances. The production within these chronological limits was catalogued as academic, a word that in most instances carried a negative connotation. Academic stood for everything attached to the Romantic and Naturalist traditions. It worked as a stigma to describe a stagnant production devoid to renewal. The decades preceding the avant-garde movement suffered the consequences of such interpretation. In a period of nearly 30 years, Armando Menocal and Leopoldo Romagnach monopolized the historiography of Cuban art. Most of the authors highlight their significance in the evolution of Cuban art. However, a lack of information prevails with regards to other coexisting artists. This unequal treatment is explained by the arrival of the 1930 generation, in part, but it has more to do with the critical discourse built around the avant-garde. Writers and critics were more aggressive and opposed to the past than the artistic practice itself. To explain these contrasting attitudes between critics and promoters of the avant-garde and the artistic production per se, it is interesting to compare the review of the 1927 show by the Spanish-born, Havana-based writer Martí Casanovas with the observation of Alfred Barr, the director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 1944. While Casanova situates the exhibition in the platform of changes supported by Revista de Avance, Barr observes how Cuban artists were able to combine past and present with autochthonous themes with foreign influences. Talking about on behalf of his own generation, Casanovas writes, and I quote, "We fully condemn and negate the art of the 19th century. The highest aspiration of our young artists is to forget all that has existed, all the museums they have visited, all the pyrotechnics of the past. We are trying to start anew." Almost 20 years later, and with a more calm, ecumenical spirit, Alfred Barr describes the artistic works through a more conciliatory point of view, stating, "Paris and Mexico the Italian Renaissance and Baroque masters have all contributed to modern painting, but this foreign influences has been fused to a remarkable extent with native Cuban elements, including fighting cocks, sugarcane cutters, guanabanas, barber shops, bandits, nudes, angels, and hurricanes. End of the quote. In Cuba, as in many other Latin American countries, the emergence of the modern movement did not lack of political overtones. The avant-garde was identified with the nationalist discourse and therefore as an alleged antecedent of the 1959 revolution. In contrast, the 10th century was associated with the Republican period. It is not hard to understand why after 1959, many of the art critics and art historians in the island adopted an unfavorable position towards a production developed outside of the orbit of the avant-garde. Fortunately, in recent decades, there has been a recurrent interest in questioning the official discourse of the art history to reevaluate forgotten names and trends. As a forsake, the National Museum of Fine Arts adopted the curatorial proposal from Spain, specifically from the Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofía, for the reopening of the institution in 2001. That inclusion gave autonomy to artists and works from the permanent collection who had never been shown before or that had only been presented under the generic term of academia. For the first time, this group was classified as a separate collection, as a link between the 19th century tradition and the modern movement of the 1930s. The well-known names of Armando Manocal, Leopoldo Romagnac, and Domingo Ramos shared the gallery space with works by Maria Cardevila, Federico Beltrán Macés, Manuel Mesa, Manuel Vega, Antonio Rodríguez Morey, Hipólito Canal, among many others. This proposal pluralized the discourse about Cuban art, pointing out to the emergence of the vast generation of artists whose heterogeneous proposals are impossible to categorize under one generic adjective. Cuban writer and critic Jorge Mañach offers an interesting view in his assessment of the artistic production of the first 30 years of the 20th century. In his essay, La pintura en Cuba, desde 1900 hasta el presente, 1924, the author breaks down the art of the beginning of the century into three generations, including an intermediate generation between Menocal and Romagnac and that one of Víctor Manuel García and Eduardo Abela. Mañach identifies this intermediate generation as la llama de la transición libertaria, the flame of the libertarian transition, a transition that, according to his appreciation, started to happen around 1910. By this time, Havana was a fertile arena for changes. In the last quarter of the 19th century, the village turned into a cosmopolitan city. The last decades of the 19th century are highly fragmented and hard to organize. The unexpected death of several young painters and the Spanish and Spanish-American wars should have impacted the artistic production. It should be necessary to wait until 1902 so that under new circumstances of stability, the art production started to show new orientations. The Republic and the new century came almost at the same time. At least at the beginning, the establishment of the Republic should have generated an atmosphere of new expectations and recovery. The free movement and confrontation of ideas that suffer a potential paralysis in the context of the war, as well as under the circumstances of the U.S. military intervention, was probably rearticulated under the new social-political order. The country was getting ready to affirm itself as an independent nation, so there were many artists and writers who contributed to the gradual recovery and modernization of the island through their practices. As a result, the art and culture circulation system was consolidated and enhanced. Several cultural magazines such as Arte, Revista de Bellas Artes, and Gaceta de Bellas Artes made their appearance in Havana. As far as exhibition spaces, there were several places in Havana that included art shows as part of their programming. Among them, El Ateneo, los Centros Regionales Españoles, el Diario de la Marina, the Hotel Sevilla, and la Academia Nacional de Artes y Letras. However, exhibiting art was not their main social object, but a collateral function. It was in 1916 when Cuban painter and intellectual Federico Edelman y Pintor created the Salón de Bellas Artes, with the intention of giving a stable frequency to the promotion of art through an annual exhibition. In the first decade of the 20th century, the commercialization of art started to take form as well. La Paleta, La Venecia, El Pincel, and El Arte were some of the art supplies stores that simultaneously engaged in selling works of arts and craft. For many artists, those spaces were key to ensuring that their works of art were marketed to a vast buying public. Such was the case of Juan Gil Garcia, the Spanish painter established in Havana, who became popular for his still life paintings. While his participation in the 1916 and 1917 fine art salons probably contributed to the growing demand for his paintings, his contract with El Arte was fundamental in his career. Located at Calle Galeano, number 506, the El Arte was founded in 1907. Gil Garcia worked from this platform at its fever pitch, producing paintings featuring the two things that define his career, landscape and still life. Gil Garcia defined and systematized a genre whose precedents in the country were very few and far between. His work typifies a form that must be then wait until late 1930s to experience a new transformation in the poetics of Amelia Peláez. Despite the success he achieved, his style and contribution was later attacked and condemned to ostracism as the embodiment of an obsolete academicism. Other genres also suffered to be read and judged from the perspective of the avant-garde instead of from their own horizon of references. Reverting to this process, the production that precedes the modern art can be seen as a link between the tradition from the 19th century and the new propositions that characterized Cuban art after 1930s. Landscape painters such as Eduardo Morales, Antonio Rodriguez Morey, and Domingo Ramos initiated a new way of representing the Cuban countryside. This genre favored a dialogue with the modern languages and offered a wide repertoire of possibilities by incorporating a vast spectrum of trends, ranging from naturalism to symbolism. Domingo Ramos was among the artists who generalized the realistic representation of light that had been initiated in the 19th century by painter Valentín Sancarta, a Spanish painter Valentín Sancarta. Instead of depicting the sunrise and sunset as in the Romantic tradition, Ramos preferred to capture the moment of greater luminosity, becoming an expert in painting tropical light. Portrait painting was increasingly focused in the psychology of its models, and not only in the description of their social position as in the 19th century. The plurality in the representation of women was another contribution of portraiture during the turn of the century. The peasant woman of the Valderrama coexisted with the aristocratic and exotic femme fatale of Beltrán Macés, whose style, strongly informed by symbolism and Art Deco, was very peculiar among his contemporaries. Despite the amplification of the spectrum of models and the gradual interest of the artist in the background of the compositions, the theme of portrait changed with moderation. More than proposing a radical rupture with the tradition, this genre describes a storyline that connects the style of Menocal and Romagnac with the works of Jorge H. during the 1930s and the 1940s, passing by Manuel Vega, Hipólito Canals, and Esteban Valderrama. Paintings show a spatial interest in ornament and decoration, in the recreation of some kind of scenographic atmospheres to better approach the different topics, whether portrait or a scene of everyday life. Even history and religious subjects, which sometimes were difficult to classify by the formal subdivision of the art history genres, since they started to blend and mix among them, function more as a menu than as a canon. In the words of Maria Cardevila, Ramon Lloyd, Domingo Ramos, and many others, the depiction of elements and symbols of the identity were very recurrent. Musical instruments, national flora and fauna, architectural symbols, The exuberance of the tropical fruits, among other typical elements of Cuba, were highlighted as part of a sense of belonging and identity that was later taken to another level of discussion and complexity by the generations of modern painters. Cuban painting of the turn of the century should be considered as a bridge connecting tradition and innovation. More than the unique style, the art of these decades experienced a communion of different trends that favored the gradual transition from another idea of modernity. As a group, these artists gave to their successors other enduring legacies, such as the desire to insert art in the context of contemporary culture, the aspiration for continuous innovation, the freedom to choose from different trends or apply them simultaneously, and the desire to establish a fluid communication with the public. The turn of the century was a period of particular importance in the formation of the national style. If after 1930 there was a shift in the concept of art, this previous time paved the way for such transformation. This period is still under review. Only a systematic research will continue to bring light about the biographies of each of these artists that now we are seeing as a group. Although condemned to the realm of the unknown by later Cuban historiography, the decades preceding the avant-garde deserves a place within the continuum of Cuban art and beyond its border. Thank you very much.
Hello. Well, I'd like to first acknowledge and thank Florida International University and the Cuban Research Institute, Dr. Jorge Duani, for this invitation, this opportunity to speak to you all. I'd also like to thank a friend, two friends, Jorge and Arlene Perez. Back in the 80s when we started collecting art together, I never thought that Jorge was going to grow so much and was going to be so important in promoting Cuban art in Miami and throughout the world. Thanks to him, in part, we're here today, and we have this wonderful collection here at Frost Museum, and also an excellent exhibition at the Perez Museum in Miami of Cuban contemporary art, Cuban and Cuban American contemporary art. I hope you don't miss it. Finally, I'd also like to acknowledge and say hello to my dear friend, my teacher. I could very well be his most pestering student, Juan Martinez. Thank you, Juan, for everything you've done. Thank you. The subject that occupies this panel today is the consolidation of Cuban art in the first half of the 20th century. I've opted to focus on the word consolidation and to dwell on the historical process that brought about this very uncommon phenomenon, that an artistic movement from the peripheral area of the dominant art centers of the world, from an island that had just recently become a nation, unquestionably located in the outer boundaries of the modern art movement, unexpectedly found itself, its art, its paintings and sculptures recognized and consolidated in a period of just 30 years. This near miracle takes place from 1927, the chosen birth date of the Cuban vanguardia, to about the late 1950s, when the political situation and the disruptions that occurred created problems for the modernist art movement in the country, and found itself, that movement and many of these artists, in dispersion, disconnected from its main international support platform, the United States, and to a lesser extent, other Latin American countries. To further comprehend the exceptional nature of this occurrence, we should take into account the total population of Cuba in 1927, only 3.8 million people. By 1959, 6.8 million souls. This movement, the Cuban Vanguardia, or as Alfred Barr and others have also called it, the School of Havana, is composed clearly by two generations of artists from the island. The first generation of the 20th century modernists in Cuba was formed by artists born in the last decade of the 19th century up to about 1905. They erupted collectively in the art scene in Havana on May 7th of 1927, just 90 years ago, as part of the Primera Exposición de Arte Nuevo at the Asociación de Pintores y Escultores, and under the auspices of that anarchist magazine, Revista de Avance. This exhibition coalesced a movement, and the vanguardias were then a reality. A small and loose band of artists, young, rebellious, and determined to advance the cost of modernity in the arts, in Cuba and elsewhere. They were nationalistic in their desire to contribute to the shaping of a definition of a national Cuban identity. But they were also internationalists and humanists, not isolationists nor chauvinists. They were pushing for a modern, revolutionary new attitude towards the arts. And further, they set out to promote radical changes in culture and society in general. To be a modern artist in Havana in the 1920s, you had to be blessed with a sort of sacerdotal calling. Vows of poverty were all but demanded. The scorn of the traditional painters assured. The extremely limited exhibition opportunities unavoidable. Throughout the following years and decades, key artists of this movement emerged and were recognized as important creators. Allow me to mention my favorite dozen of first-generation vanguardia artists. They say that all art gallerists are capricious, and I am not the exception. Victor Manuel Garcia, Carlos Enriquez, Amelia Peláez, Fidelio Ponce, Eduardo Abela, Antonio Gatorno, Marcelo Pogolotti, Alberto Peña, Aristides Fernández, Jorge Arce, Domingo Ravenet, and last, and probably first, Wilfredo Lam. The first generation of modern Cuban artists was well prepared for the venture. They were aware of the various languages of modernism through Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Cubism, the fall of Futurism, Surrealism, and even abstraction and expressionism. They had read, they had studied. Many had traveled, searched and researched. They carved their own formative path by changing the routes of their education. After Havana and mostly San Alejandro, their preferred destination was Montparnasse and the School of Paris, not Madrid and the San Fernando Academy, as their teachers in San Alejandro had done before them. The young ones went to Paris. They lived, they learned, they painted alongside the top artists of the School of Paris in the 1920s and 30s. Picasso, Matisse, Chagall, Bonnard, Modigliani, Mondrian, Kandinsky, and others. These were their neighbors. The first generation vanguardia artists soon saw reinforcements coming in the movement, and they were strengthened and invigorated with the arrival of the second generation of artists, who gave continuance to the essential goals of the first, but expressed themselves in their own distinctive and unique artistic styles and thematic preferences. The second generation was not at all mimic, derivative, nor subservient to the older group. The second generation of vanguardia artists turned out to be just as strong and creative a group as the first. These artists were conscious of the central objectives of the movement. A, to contribute to define, affirm, and divulge a national identity, while B, elevating the modernist artistic discourse to a higher level of international acceptance and recognition. This duality of purpose, national and international, was best stated by the intellectual poet Juan Marinero at the very beginning of the movement in 1925, when he published, and I quote, "Cubanization of art requires a process of artistic integration in which artists learn to view the indigenous with the eyes of the foreigner and the foreign with the eyes of a Cuban, resulting in the universalization of Cuban artistic themes," end of quote. Allow me to express again my sympathies with regards to many artists that formed this second generation of modernists in Cuba. Mario Carreño, Mariano Rodríguez, René Portocarrero, Jundo Bermúdez, Luis Martínez Pedro, Alfredo Lozano, Raúl Milián, José Mijares, Roberto Diago, Roberto Estopiñán, Mirta Serra, and Felipe Orlando. These second-generation Cuban avant-garde artists were born around 1910 to about 1922. They arrived at the scene at a moment when, fortunately, modern art had tenuously secured a foothold in Havana, thanks to the groundbreaking efforts of the first generation. Their presentation in Havana's artistic circles was gradual, not as dramatic as the 1927 event. The modernist movement also had the support of the Cuban intelligentsia, and clearly of its writers, poets, and critics. Two notorious critics, José Gómez Sique and Gil Pérez Cisneros, not only explained the substance of the art to the national audience, but went further by securing the presentation of modern art of Cuba in the international arena, thereby facilitating the second objective of the movement. In the 1940s, Cuban modern art exhibitions took place in Stockholm, Moscow, Guatemala City, Buenos Aires, Lima, Port-au-Prince, Mexico City, and Paris. The culmination of this alliance of the two generations of painters was reached on March 14, 1944, the day the exhibition Modern Cuban Painters inaugurated at the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York City. The MoMA then was considered, and continues to be, the Vatican of worldwide modernism in the arts. Its director